Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies and characters that make us feel seen. Today, my co-host is a multi-hyphenate icon of screens big and small. From film to television to the internet, it is actor, comedian, and filmmaker, Brian Jordan Alvarez. We did it. We harnessed the internet inside of Feeling Seen. You may know Brian from the killer horror film Megan, or from his web series The Gay and Wondrous Life of Caleb Gallo. Or maybe you know him as Marnie T. But if you've been on the internet at any point in the past 2 months, you most likely know Brian from his new FX series, The English Teacher. It is a comedy show created by Brian himself. He plays Evan Marquez, a high school teacher in Austin, Texas, who finds himself at the intersection of the personal, professional, and political aspects of educating today's youth. The series is refreshingly hilarious and just hilarious without being a sad show. Critically acclaimed and incredibly gay. We are canonically gay here on Feeling Seen, so it's very important. An absolute joy to watch. The finale of the show's first season just aired, which means you can backtrack and just binge all 8 episodes of The English Teacher right now. Okay, take a seat, grab some paper and a pen, because class is in session with Brian Jordan Alvarez. Brian Jordan Alvarez, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started today?
Oh man, just that I'm enjoying I'm really enjoying the reception of English Teacher right now. People are.
I hope so. It's getting a very good reception.
Yeah, people are loving it, and I'm just grateful because we really loved what we were making, and we were like, I think this is super funny. And now the fact that people are responding to it, especially last night's episode, we have this like crazy, we have a lot of crazy characters in the show, and there's this mom character in this field trip episode we just did, and people are really loving it the way we loved it when we were making it. So I love it.
Have you ever been surprised by something that you have made, like catching on, in the sense of like, I wasn't sure about this one? Or do the ones that catch on in whatever format they take, do they generally feel good when you've done them?
I think I have a good barometer for what people will find funny, but what is hard to predict, at least on the internet, is when a video is going to go viral.
Oh,
so
God, yeah.
you can predict when it's like gonna be well received, but you sort of don't know what's going to have that rare magic strike.
I was reading an old a Vulture interview with you from when Megan came out, and Rebecca Alter was the one who interviewed you, and she talked about how you've been making.
I love Rebecca Alter. She also was like the co-host of I did a live interview at something called Vulture Fest.
Oh yeah, I worked several Vulture Fests in my time at Vulture.
Oh yeah. Oh, so you know Rebecca.
Well, something she asked you about in that particular Megan interview, she was like, you've been making really funny, like really gay stuff for a while. And as I think we were about similar aged, like around the millennials, very settled in the millennial distinction.
Mm-hmm.
When did you know you could be making funny queer comedy? Or was that something you were always comfortable with? Like, we grew up in the very homo-nationalistic 2000s, post 9/11 world. Was that something you were always comfortable putting out there? Or was there a juncture where you were like, oh, I'm realizing that I can harness this voice in this way?
That's a great question. I don't think that it was very conscious. Looking back, there did seem to be a time when I shifted into that. And actually, I was in something called Gay Men Will Marry Your Girlfriends, which was a viral video on College Humor. That was an amazing video. It was not, sometimes people think I made that video or something, but I didn't. It was just a College Humor video that I acted in. And that went viral. And so that was almost my first taste of like internet viral fame. And it was a very, gay forward video. And so it was just like about, it was a pro-gay marriage video, and it did really well. And so then it felt like, maybe a bit more like obvious after that or something. But I definitely, there was never a conscious decision made, I don't think. I think I've just always been trying to make content about what I find funny. And it varies, like my characters are all just like the subject of what they do. Because I have all these characters on Instagram and TikTok. The subject of what they do is so, it almost doesn't matter. It's just more about who they are and how they are. I guess they talk about what they do, but yeah.
I mean, thank God Marnie T talks about what
What
Marnie
she
T
does.
does.
Yeah,
Because
meditation. Yeah, retreats. Yeah, classes.
what would we do without source energy? What would any of us
Yeah.
be without source energy?
There's a Marnie T video that's kind of a deep cut that I really loved because I think I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, staying at a hotel that I think was a casino or something. I was like on a solo road trip. And I made this video where Marnie T was talking about this trucker that she had fallen in love with in Biloxi, Mississippi, like in her youth.
And he said to me, "You know what, Marnie? I've never met anyone who has the kind of spiritual connectedness that I see in you." Sign up for my class.
I don't know. There's something about that kind of really free creative space that just is so special and is kind of unrecreatable, or I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, there's just times in our lives that arise where there's space to be creative and to be bored. There's space where, because really huge creativity, I think about this a lot, comes after, it's like sometimes people call it unstructured time or whatever, but really it's like huge creativity can come after real boredom. And like boredom can actually be something, I mean, maybe this is obvious to everybody, but boredom can be something you resist, because when it's coming on, when you're really getting bored, me at least as an adult, I go, I'm an adult, I'm 37 and I'm bored. I'm like bored like the way a kid is bored. Like shouldn't I be working on something? So then usually you do find your time, you do find ways to fill your time. But when you just can't find a cure for the boredom and you actually get bored, then after that is when some of the biggest creativity rises for me. It was a similar thing where like I made this video about this character that people call the student, or like the intern character. And it was when I was in Rome, I was in Italy, and I had been so jet lagged. To me, jet lag, I have jet lag a lot worse than most people. I'm like, whenever I'm going through jet lag and other people are like, why don't you just blah blah blah? I'm like, this subject, you will never understand how badly jet lag affects me. It's like it's like my body is like
everybody's got a cure for hiccups, and someone's like, yeah, I've literally never heard that advice ever. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. It's like my body just really, really sticks to a sleep schedule and really resists changing it. So anyway, long story short, I'm in Italy and I'm like having whole nights where I just can't sleep. But there's a lot of boredom that comes from that. You're like tired of playing on your phone. You're just sitting there alone. And then like, this one video that went really viral of that student character where he says like, Welt, I've been on an elegant walk
the elegant walk. Yes.
Yeah. That one, I think, also arose out of this sort of time of boredom. So anyway, I guess my rant today is pro boredom creativity rant.
I'm wondering at what time in your life you were first exposed to the movie that you've brought for discussion today, which is Pedro Almodovar's All About My Mother. Were you a teenager prone to boredom, discovering Spanish cinema?
Yeah, actually I was. Yeah, I was 16 and I think summer bored, or maybe 15. My mom worked in the Spanish department at her university. She works in the Spanish department at her university, and so they had a VHS of All About My Mother, Todo Sobre Mi Madre by Pedro Almodovar. And I don't know, somehow she had it around and I watched it and I was just like, this is the best movie I've ever seen. And I consider it my favorite movie. And it's like it's in a close race with Prometheus by Ridley Scott, which people find.
What a fascinating double feature of faves.
I know. And Dirty Dancing is maybe my third. Yeah.
That's a man of range.
Yeah, they are quite different. Dirty Dancing and All About My Mother, I think, are more siblings than Prometheus. But they all do have this gorgeous visual aesthetic and this sort of elegance about them, I think. But yeah, All About My Mother. Yeah, I was a teenager, and there was this summer when I was watching a lot of movies, but I don't think that was the same summer. There was the summer when I watched Y Tu Mamá También by Alfonso Cuarón, I believe. And I remember there was an ad before that movie for the soundtrack, and it was like, buy the soundtrack to Y Tu Mamá También by Alfonso.
Why?
Yeah, maybe it was E.T. Mama Time, but anyway, yeah, he said it in a thick American accent. But yeah, All About My Mother. Yeah, and what's funny is when I first watched it, All About My Mother, I watched it without subtitles many times, and I watched sort of a pretty low res version of it because it was like copied onto a VHS or something, and I still could tell it was the best movie I'd ever seen. And so later, when I watched it with subtitles and in high def, I was like blown away. But also because my mom is Colombian, so I speak Colombian Spanish, and that movie's in Spanish from Spain. And so there were a lot of turns of phrase that I didn't understand. So about 25-30% of the movie I was getting on a feeling level, but like even on technically later when I watched it with subtitles, I was like, oh, that's what they're saying. That's what's going on in the scene. And it's just greatly to the movie's credit because even misunderstanding things or not understanding them, I was like, this is a masterpiece. And I mean, people agree it won the Oscar in 99.
Esteban! Esteban! Por favor, hijo mío, hijo mío, hijo mío, hijo mío, hijo mío.
Why was it so evidently masterful to you?
Well, Pedro Almodovar's visual sense is some of the best in the world. It's just like the colors and the light, and I'm always chasing that lighting. He has a certain kind of lighting, especially in that movie where he puts a lot of light over people's shoulders, and it's called rim light, I think, which is like it goes around their head. It's coming sort of from behind you and above you.
Kind of like beatific almost.
Yeah, it's making you kind of glow a little bit like an angel, and then very nice, beautiful, soft lighting on the face, and yeah, just romantic lighting, dark darks and light lights, and it's very special. But his use of bright color too is something that I had a learning curve about because I thought that the saturation was cranked up in his movies, but it might be a little bit, but the saturation is pretty standard. What's actually happening is the production design is making use of very strong colors. And so I've learned to do that over time and learned that it's not really about cranking the saturation up so much as it is putting colorful things in the frame.
With somebody who really built a foundation under them, like, on the way to English teacher, which is obviously a different element of production value coming from an FX television show. Like, how did you incorporate or hone or sort of consider your aesthetic within like front-facing videos where it's more of a sort of like found material? You're doing a lot of improvisation. The context is what it is within those sort of videos, and so they like have certain constraints on them, or like how do you tame that desire toward high aesthetic like that when working with a lot of kind of like DIY elements, putting your work out there, like the quick turnaround stuff?
It's a great question because actually you're describing exactly what that journey was for me, which was that I was very into really making the best visuals I could. Even when it was just me and my friends with a camera, I was still interested in trying to make that look good, right? Even in an amateur way. And it was COVID really, and the sitting around of COVID that many of us did, that made me finally go, you know what? I'm just gonna post this little video I did with this Snapchat filter on. And I think I'd been kind of making them as a joke for myself for a while, but it was really this Marnie T character that you mentioned, this sort of spiritual character that I do. And people just love those characters. It's a particular genre. There's not that many people that do it in that exact way. And it's, to me, it's like, it's been a gift in my life to be able to use my creative juice in such a, like you're saying, a fast turnaround way, because it also helps me satisfy the desire to be creative while I'm working on things that take longer, like, high level productions like English Teacher.
And how, like, in getting into, like, making English Teacher, like, going up the production value gets to be higher on something like that. Is that something where how much of the aesthetic of the show sort of was within your sphere of control, and how much, like, with more resources at your disposal, was that something, how much of that was, like, part of the craft of putting this together and executing
It was a lot.
what you had in your head?
Yeah, a lot. I really cared. I really care. I continue to care how the show looks and is, and we have a great production designer, Kate Bunch, and we had an amazing DP, Brian Burgoyne, and a different DP on the pilot who's also excellent, Jeff Waldron. And with Jonathan Kreisel, who directed about half of the episodes or slightly more, I think, this season, and was one of our EPs, who does have a very strong visual sense. We really worked on these things, and we would look at images, from Pedro Almodovar movies and be like, this is how I want this shot to look. And there were times when there was often the opportunity to go more gritty with the visuals, and I would say, no, I want this to look beautiful. Basically, I want this to look good and I don't know, just elegant, not just Almodovar, but Ridley Scott similarly is another one of my creative idols, and he similarly has this strong visual aesthetic that really in large part comes from the lighting and the production design, but the lighting is a huge part of it, this sort of shiny, sleek, beautiful lighting. So I was often, I was very involved, and I really cared about that. And I think we pulled it off. I love the way the show looks, and I feel excited to go even further with the visuals of the show.
With watching All About My Mother, then, did it stand out to you at the time as sort of something different from, like, perhaps other, like, American media that you were consuming? Like, if I had been watching that in 1999, I don't know that I would have put the word transgressive to it, but I think later I would have understood that, like, shit, I was watching something transgressive.
I guess it was almost like I knew that I was watching something that was more up my alley than anything I'd ever seen, and something that I was like, oh, this is made by someone who I relate to in a way that nothing I'd ever seen had been, except for maybe like Dirty Dancing has a similar quality. It had a, All About My Mother has like a certain heart and soul to it that I related to it. I connected to it. I don't think I knew it was edgy or thought of it as edgy. I just thought of it as like the best thing I'd ever seen, and the thing I felt the most connected to out of anything I'd ever seen.
And beyond, like, the aesthetic of it, like, what do you know, like, narratively, could you speak to now what those things were that you're like, damn, these things were really latching into me? Like, especially as somebody who would go on to be creating characters of their own and sharing arcs of those characters with massive watching audiences.
I think it's just a great story, which is like lightning in a bottle. Almodovar writes a lot of amazing stories, and something about the story and All About My Mother is just perfect. It wanders in the perfect ways, and it's just, I don't know, it just closes all the loops so well. It's just a perfect story. Story is a can be kind of a mystical thing. It takes you, and you can work on it and you can improve it, but the I don't know, there's something magical about it. So I just, that story of this woman, and early on in the movie, spoilers, but her son dies, and so then she goes to another city where she came from, and she's looking for his father, and it's like, it's just amazing. It's a masterpiece.
Manuela, desgraciadamente, el resultado del encefalograma es el que nos temíamos. Hay que tomar una decisión, no tenemos tiempo.
When you first started, like, creating characters in whatever format that was, like perhaps on the page, perhaps performing skits with friends, like when you first started realizing you were a person who was going to express themselves in that way, what kind of stories were you imagining? Like, if you were really latching on to like Almodovar and Ridley Scott, these epic creators, like what were your first stories about?
I mean, I started with just sketches, and they're just coming, almost like Seinfeld, out of just little situations in life. Yeah, then you're just writing for the characters sort of in your head, but it's a good question, because I look at Almodovar and I look at Ridley Scott and what they're working on, and I go, I don't know that stories of that scale and length, right, feature length, for instance, and with that much winding, have started to arise from me yet. And I think that with time they will, like just like a plant growing or a flower blooming, like so many things have just organically moved forward that I expect that to happen, and I look forward to it. But I mean, I still look at All About My Mother and I go, well, part of me says, how did he do this? How did he make this story up? And then part of me knows that these things kind of come to you, and they come to you through years of diligent work. And so you've sort of earned the next inspiration. So I'm doing that work and I'm looking forward to that. But I do have a certain level to which I can't quite get my head around it yet, which is what makes it exciting to me. And with Ridley Scott, he is a little different, because he doesn't generally write what he directs, which is another way to go. But I think he's heavily involved in the writing, and so that there's that too. And I've really learned to work with really amazing writers in this experience of making this show. I mean, it's like the best writers I've ever met, and it's been so cool. And so you start to go, oh, right. Well, also a lot of the great things that I love and respect, even classics like The Shining, this is either a director writing a script off of existing IP, or a director directing something that they simply did not write, so that could be exciting too, to direct and star in something that I'm not the writer of, which in a way was what the Powder Puff episode of English Teacher. I created the show, and we have this wonderful writers room, and that episode, the second episode, I wrote the pilot and I wrote 3 other episodes of the season. The second episode is written by Stephanie Koenig and directed by me. And it was sort of that cool thing of getting to direct this thing that I didn't write the script for, but we're all heavily involved, and the room writes the script. And the farther along you get in this, the more you just learn to not only love, but be so grateful for the collaboration, because the stuff that comes out of it is just so cool. You're like, whoa, this is so much better than I could have imagined, because all these other energies were working together with me to make something that was, like I was saying earlier, more than the sum of its parts, ideally.
It's time for a break, but we will be right back with more from Brian Jordan Alvarez. More on The English Teacher, Almodovar, and Brian in space. Then before we go, I will have one quick thing at the end about a very tonally different thing that I am so excited is on its way, should be dropping with this episode on Netflix. Timo Chianto's The Shadow Strays. So stick around for a little discussion about that.
Ego sum John Hodgman.
Et ego sum Janet Varney.
And we're the hosts of E Pluribus Motto, a podcast dedicated to exploring the mottos of every state in the Union.
Every episode, we will spotlight one state and discuss its official symbols, the motto, flowers, birds, beverages, songs, and even official state muffins.
Plus, we'll hear from guests whose lives have been inspired by the state's iconography, and from residents who call that state home.
Bring some snacks, a map, and your travel journal, because this podcast is a virtual journey like no other.
Audi nostrum E Pluribus Motto, quae libet alia lunae de maximum fun.
And for the Latin challenged among you and us, listen to E Pluribus Motto every other Monday on Maximum Fun.
Since 2017, Maximum Film has had the same slogan.
The podcast that's not just a bunch of straight white guys.
Ooh, we've learned something over the years. Some people out there really do not like that slogan.
Listen, we love straight white guys.
Well, some of them.
But if there's one thing we can't change, it's who we are.
I'm Iffy, a comedian who was on strike last year in 2 different unions.
I'm Drea. I've been a producer and film festival programmer for decades.
And I'm Alonzo, a film critic who literally wrote the book on queer Hollywood.
You can listen to us talk movies and the movie biz every week on Maximum Film.
We may not be straight white guys, but we love movies, and we know what we're talking about.
Listen to Maximum Film on Maximum Fun or wherever you listen to podcasts.
A thing where I felt seen in watching The English Teacher is with that, again, that like sort of very established millennial age area that we're in, and what your teacher is in as well. He teaches at a school in Austin. It's a pretty like integrated school. Like it seems like you're going to encounter a sort of every kind of slice of life there. I love the contrast between queer folks and particularly queer folks of color are the ones who most often like create the cultural touch points and the sort of bleeding edge art that then like trickles down that everybody else experiences. Like they have the conversation about the cerulean blue sweater and then everybody else puts it on and thinks it was their idea. But like what I enjoy, I think I enjoy so much about your character is that he is a queer man in this high school who is like having to kind of play catch up all the time in some fashion to like the younger people around him. And that felt very authentic to me.
I'm doing something about this.
Yeah, I'm gonna do something about this dick.
That's what you got out of that, Frank? Come on, man.
I mean, it's a gun safety course, Mr. Marquez. You think shutting that down is gonna do anything about gun violence?
It's the principle of it.
He's trying to take a stand.
I am taking a stand, Jeff. I'm taking a stand, okay? I don't care if you guys get it.
Of course we get it. We've been doing drills our entire lives. We're used to it.
You shouldn't be used to it. That is so depressing.
It's not that depressing.
Mr. Marquez, I'm with you. I'm super anti-gun.
Hartman, we know you're anti-gun. Your parents are like hippies. They are like anti-electricity.
They're not anti-electricity. They're pro-wind turbines.
Evan, that's what I love about this character is he, like everyone in the show, is doing his best, and it's just fun to watch people try to do their best. And in a comedy, essentially the hijinks that ensue when they're trying to figure out how to do that, basically.
Perhaps it's just something you have a knack for, and perhaps it's something you've had to like instill a boundary in. Like, where do you find is the line for you between like the ability to absorb enough, because as a very online individual, the ability to absorb enough about what is happening in the corners of the internet that you inhabit without feeling beholden to those corners of the internet and the sort of influence that they can exert, because you know enough to like have very current feeling storylines actually that seem to feel like they work honestly with the younger generation present, like the Gen Z, Gen Alpha present in the show. Which is like, I feel like that's one of the hardest things for people to do is when they start writing words into the mouths of kids for things, they just write their generation into them.
Right.
So how do you find your balance between like, I'm taking it in, but I'm not feeling beholden to the cultural barometer necessarily in a way that I can imagine is quite stifling.
I think it's just about writing all the characters with empathy, basically. We just try to write them from a place where they are doing what they know to do, like they're coming from their own perspective. With the internet stuff, it's like, I don't know, my TikToks are the same way, where like I was saying about boredom, it's like it all just washes over me, and I love just being on Twitter and laughing at someone's funny tweet, or on TikTok laughing at someone's funny video, and then that stuff just soaks in, and then I just kind of go for it, and I'm glad it's working. I'm grateful. We have a lot of great actors too. They sell this great writing, and we have a lot of great writers that really just contributed so much to this show. And like the idea of Powder Puff, I had never even heard of that, and it came up in the writers' room, and then a lot of
I remember my Powder Puff games in high school.
Oh, you did it? Did you play?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Sophomores
wow.
versus seniors every year. That was the game.
I know that was the other thing, was we were debating, like, should they be playing themselves? Like, does the school play itself, or does the school play another school? And I think usually actually the school plays itself, but we played it that they were playing another school, but we barely show them.
I did like it was a bit more epic to have it be an interconference showdown. It seemed like between schools.
Yeah, we actually had a shot of the other team's cheerleaders in like their sort of much less impressive outfits, but we ended up cutting that out for time. But
well, and you were saying before, like the sort of metaphor of like the plants and the maturation and flowers blooming and things like that. And having worked on like at a new scale of a TV series for a network, what have you found has that advanced or adjusted about your sense of the possible in the things that you make?
I'm excited that I know how to work in a bigger, on this huge professional level now. I'm very excited. It feels like fun and natural, and like I've got so many more ideas.
Does working at a bigger scale catalyze one to think at a bigger scale?
I think I was always thinking at a big scale. Yeah. Because, if I'm loving Prometheus, I'm like, I want to make something like that. And that, I don't know how much that costs. Should we look that up? What's the budget of Prometheus?
Something on the order of a very big bank heist.
$130 million budget. That's wild.
You know what? Considering what a Marvel movie can cost,
What do Marvel
say
movies
they did
cost?
that like 250 million.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say they did Prometheus efficiently in that case.
Yeah, I was just shooting an amazing big studio movie, Megan 2, the second one, and
amazing.
It's so great, and I love everyone involved in that. And I love Gerard Johnstone, the director, so much, and it was just amazing to see something at that huge scale. And really, what struck me this time was the preparation that goes into it. That's what makes the day go smoothly. They just know every shot they've got to get, and they've done, they've storyboarded it. They know what this is going to look like. They've planned and planned and planned. And that's what struck me this time. I was like, oh, the planning. It's the planning. When you're making a movie for, I don't know what the budget there was, but like we're talking about with Prometheus, $130 million, like it's the planning. You just got to plan and plan and plan. And that takes months or years to plan out. And then you go and you have fun at the shoot.
Yeah. And I go and I have a great time.
Exactly. I know Ridley Scott uniquely uses a lot of cameras. Most movies don't use more than 2 or maybe 3 cameras in a day, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Ridley Scott, I think sometimes will shoot things with 8 cameras and just cover it and cover it. But and then he'll this is just what I've heard, but it sounds cool to me. He'll only do a few takes and he'll feel like, all right, we got it, which is cool. There's so many different ways to work.
A thing that I really have come to appreciate about like Ridley Scott specifically is how much he makes, like how much that guy works.
I know, absolutely, yes.
And not just because he's like coming at like he's about 80, like and he's still at, but like,
and he's trying things. He's trying different genres. He's trying different scripts. He's the best. I love him. Yeah.
And Almodovar he is a fairly prolific director as well.
He's got like a movie every year or two. Yeah.
Yeah, he has made so many things, and I feel like there can be so much, like particularly if you're a part of any marginalized group, there can be so much pressure to have everything be great or have perfect be the enemy of good, where it's like if it doesn't come out and like change the world, it's like what have you even doing with your opportunities? But I like to see people with the infrastructure and the industry cosign to maybe not have everything be their best work.
Right.
Just keep swinging over and over and over, because it just like to see the constant affirmation of like, I do this because I absolutely love it, because I stopped needing to do it financially or reputationally or otherwise a long time ago. That makes me have more fun like diving into the movies, because I feel like they only come out as labors of passion when you could just be retired with an incredible legacy behind you.
I know, you're so right. Yeah, Ridley Scott, he's you can feel that he's having fun. I mean, I remember him in an interview talking about how before he ever got to make Alien, he had shot 1,000 commercials. And I think that way of working where he's just like shoot it and shoot it and shoot it and shoot it. I feel that in his work and in his legacy, and it's so cool.
You know, being a creator like yourself, you're constantly like, yes, it's output and it's workshopping and it's like, okay, like I want to get something out there, I want to have my name on it, like I don't want to feel sedentary, but it's also all reps. And like constantly keeping yourself sort of
reps, exactly, your 10,000 hours, yeah,
in like fighting shape, like constantly keeping yourself in training mode. Like when getting a show off the ground is not something that takes a month in Hollywood. Like that's something that takes years, but to be able to, in the meantime.
And that's what the character videos are good for too. It's like, I'm still every day usually producing something that someone sees and can enjoy, and that those are reps in their own way. Yeah, I think you're so right. Exactly, staying in shape and just doing it more and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again and making movies and making TV shows and acting and things. And yeah.
Well, it seems like in an industry where you're kind of like, you're sort of like almost not supposed to celebrate things until they're basically like at everyone else's doorstep. Like it's like, okay, by the time an announcement hits the trades, like so much has already happened and like you couldn't be talking about that in a public forum. So I being able to have the self-determination to put out things that can be achievements or victories or milestones or markers or just daily reports of progress, like in some way, I feel like that's a good respite from the like hurry up and wait that can be the bigger machine parts of the industry.
Exactly. So then you just feel like you're working all the time and your work is taking different shapes, and that's what I love. Yeah, you really get it. Absolutely.
I'm glad I'm not just coming on here and saying things at you that you're like, that's patently false.
No, you're so right. You're so right.
In the meantime, I guess my question to you would be, if you had a genre that you were, if you're on your own, you're just tinkering, is there a genre that you like to play in that perhaps you have not created in yet, but that you're like, this is a pathway that there's intrigue?
Yeah, I mean, on the big studio level, I want to make movies in space for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just movies about space to me are everything. I mean, Prometheus, Aliens, Contact. I watched Contact over and over, masterpiece. I liked Gravity more recently.
Have you seen one of the great space horrors, Event Horizon?
I don't think I have.
If you would like to watch a haunted house in space movie, highly recommend.
So that's a space horror. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with the abundance of characters you have already gifted us with to this point in your career, I look forward to seeing who we meet in Brian Jordan Alvarez's space. And I am just so grateful that you took the time to talk to us today. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Brian.
Absolutely. What a pleasure. You're the best. You're the best. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so much to Brian Jordan Alvarez. While we await you in Megan 2.0, which he will star in alongside Allison Williams once again, you can stream all 8 episodes of The English Teacher on Hulu right now. And it is sitcom length, guys. So you can get through all 8 of these episodes in like half an afternoon. Just breeze right by. Go do it. You will not regret it. And now, that one quick thing before I go. Guys, action friends, action fans out there, people who are fans of blistering, thrilling suspense cinema, Timo Chayanto, he is back. He, of The Night Comes For Us fame, which is perhaps the just pound for pound best pure fighting movie like ever made. Like it's so good. Iko Uwais, Joe Taslim, Julia Estelle as the operator, the crazy lesbians. Watch it if you want bone incinerating, beautiful, violent, virtuoso violence on screen. While we wait for an operator sequel, which the faithful always will be, we are getting The Shadow Strays. And this movie looks as like 20 pounds of dynamite in a 10-pound bag as the night comes for us. Let me give you a little summary. Skilled in the art of killing, a young assassin defies her mentor to save a boy from a ruthless crime syndicate, and she'll destroy anyone in her path. Boom. Look at the Netflix, it gives a little like one-word description. This movie is, explosive. I don't doubt that. Timo has been feeding us little bits on X, aka Twitter. Oh God, I just called it X. Cancel me. On Twitter, it looks, I mean, look at me, I'm stuttering. It looks so exciting. It looks so good. Obviously, Night Comes for Us stands. Would love a continuation of that universe, and we've been crying for an Operator movie for years. But you know what? Timo is out here doing his thing, kicking absolute ass. And I just like, I really don't like to overhype a movie and be like, this is gonna be the best thing ever. I just know it's gonna deliver. And we are in just such a beautiful time of action cinema, like not only being created, there's been great action for a long time, but the way we are sharing it and boosting it, the way the art form is just constantly leveling itself up into new dimensions. This is super exciting. I can't say any more about it than these teases give me, because it comes out this very day. This episode drops Netflix Thursday. Support international cinema. Things get buried on Netflix. Go look for this one and support fight movies, because they rule and they are artistic feats of accomplishment. And that's our show. That's what we're going to go out on. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcru on Twitter, which is JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Eben. This show is produced by Daniel Huesias. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this, as ever, is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.